Phyllis Schlafly was a staunch conservative, lawyer, author, but more widely known as the leader of the Stop ERA movement. She opposed feminism, abortion, LGBT equality, while fighting for the values of the traditional American family. This documentary is about Schlafly and how she took down the ERA. The language of the Equal Rights Amendment is simple. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Introduced in 1923, the proposed amendment was mostly forgotten, but with the efforts of prominent second-wave feminists such as Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan, and Bella Abzug, the push for the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, was stronger than ever. ERA was met with public and bipartisan support. The amendment was presented to state legislators in 1972 with a 7-year deadline to ratify. It was almost certain that the ERA would be part of the supreme law of the land, but the one woman that stood in the way between the amendment and the Constitution was Phyllis Schlafly. Schlafly was born August 15, 1924, in St. Louis, Missouri. With her mother working 7 days a week, she was able to afford an education at a private school. Her good grades allowed her to pursue a higher education at Washington University. She studied hard in the hopes of working for the federal government. However, her professional endeavors were unsuccessful, and instead took up a job at a conservative think tank before marrying Fred Schlafly, a much older, wealthy lawyer who she had 6 kids with. Schlafly's first claim to fame came with the release of her book, A Choice Not an Echo, in 1964. The book, exposing traitors within the Republican Party, earned her recognition as a conservative activist. During this time, the women's liberation movement was in full swing, and marches, protests, and rallies were conducted by the proponents of the Equal Rights Amendment. They believed that it was necessary for women to have their rights explicitly stated in the law. This would bring an end to the legal distinctions between men and women in the areas of employment, divorce, property, and more. Schlafly was a biological determinist and believed that the ERA would radically change the roles nature had determined for men and women, with men being the breadwinners and women being the homemakers. The values and morality of the traditional family would be lost with the ratification, as well as the privilege that she believed women enjoyed. So she started the grassroots movement Stop ERA and worked incessantly to convince American citizens that ERA would do more harm to women than good. One way she did this was by instilling fear into people's minds by bringing up hypothetical situations that ERA would create. Unisex bathrooms, homosexual marriage, and women in the draft were a few points she would bring up during her debates. Dr. Faulkner, a political science professor, states that Schlafly consistently painted worst-case scenarios, which, when juxtaposed with the lives of average white women at that time, led many of them to believe that inequality wasn't so bad after all.
And what if you get drafted? Do you really want to go fight in wars? Well, when you frame something in that way, there is an immediate fear that invokes in a lot of women who would answer, no, I don't want to have to do that. It worked like a charm. She convinced women that they actually had the privileged place in society.
Another point that Schlafly would bring up was that the protection of women under the law already existed, frequently citing Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But many feminists sharing the debate stage with Schlafly pointed out that the act was not enough. One of these feminists being the former president of the National Organization of Women, who stated, "Since women are not included in the Constitution, they are denied in terms of education, opportunities, public institutions. We are denied opportunities to open a business without going to court or receiving approval of husbands. We are denied credit, right to have a separate domicile. In at least 5 states, some women, the clothes on their back without their husband's permission." Along with appearing on talk shows across the country for debates, Schlafly published books and newsletters that pushed the conservative agenda. Her newsletter, The Phyllis Schlafly Report, and other newspaper columns she had written highlighted topics that ranged from the ERA to communism, the American family, to nuclear missiles. Even with her eminence in the political field, she still considered herself as a homemaker above all and described politics as a secondary hobby. This especially angered feminists who accused her of being a full-time lobbyist while branding herself as a homemaker to win the support of American conservatives. In the end, Schlafly's campaigns proved to be very successful, and her victory was achieved when ERA fell short of just 3 states from ratifying the amendment. With more protesting, the deadline to ratify the ERA was pushed back 5 years, but still the minimum number of 38 states was not met. As for Schlafly, she continued to be engaged in politics and used her influence to fight for the return to traditional American values and promote conservative political figures, from the Reagans to Donald Trump. She grew the Stop ERA organization into Eagle Forum, a nationally recognized interest group that is still around today. She is largely credited for steering the Republican Party towards pro-life, among other conservative values. Phyllis Schlafly died on September 5, 2016, but her legacy as a distinguished political activist will not be forgotten. So Schlafly had a huge impact on the Republican Party and really defined it to be what we know today. She exemplifies the theme individual versus society because she was able to convince the American public that the ERA wasn't desirable in a time when it was almost certain it was going to be added to the Constitution. But all hope is not lost for the proponents of the Equal Rights Amendment. There has been recent progress in the decades-long battle over this amendment as early as this year, with Virginia being the 38th state to ratify. But what the plan is moving forward to get ERA into the Constitution isn't as clear-cut.
Some have argued that you can't retroactively go back and remove a deadline in that type of legislation. Others say, why not? There's no law that prevents it. Who wins? The courts have to decide that.
So for my artifact, I decided to draw a picture of Phyllis Schlafly and outlined it with quotes that she said over the years. And some quotes that she said are very patriotic and expresses her love for her country, while others are just downright disrespectful to the people of a different race from her or who follow a different religion than her. And as this is largely symbolic because as a political activist, your words really define who you are, and these are the words that Schlafly chose to define herself.